Hello, welcome to the first free video of your free training course for Active Directory. This completely free course for Active Directory will help you implement and install Active Directory in your organization as well as prepare you for the 7640 exam. Before I get started installing, setting up, and using Active Directory, the first question you may want answered is, what is Active Directory? Active Directory is essentially a database. To better understand Active Directory, first of all consider a world without a system like Active Directory. In this world without Active Directory, every computer on the network has its own small database of usernames and passwords. Microsoft calls this kind of setup a workgroup. Essentially, a workgroup is every man for themselves and there's no central control. When you attempt to access another computer on the network, your computer username and password are sent to that computer. To allow you to have access to the other computer, it is a simple matter of creating a username and password on that computer. This presents two problems. First, it does not scale well. When you have a small network with only a few computers, you can keep this under control without too much administrative effort. Imagine if your network grew to 10 computers. Each time a new person needs access or an old person needs to be removed, you would need to visit each of the computers that are affected by that change. Now imagine you have 50 or 100 computers. You can see that this quickly becomes unmanageable. The second problem occurs when a user changes their password. When this occurs and they attempt to access another computer on the network, the passwords will be different. Because of this, the user will be prompted for a username and password when attempting to access the other computer. The user can then use their old password to access the computer, or the password needs to be updated on the remote computer to reflect the password change. The problem occurs because there is no way to keep all the usernames and passwords in sync with each other. In order to do this, you could use a centralized username and password system such as Active Directory. Active Directory keeps a centralized store of usernames and passwords. Any changes to usernames and passwords are recorded by Active Directory, and all computers on the network have access to this information. When looking into using Active Directory, the first thing you should ask yourself is, do you need Active Directory? Installing systems such as Active Directory do cost money and also mean you need to install dedicated servers to store the Active Directory database. If you have a small home or business network, Active Directory would be overkill for your needs. If you are using a pure Windows 7 network at home, you may want to consider using Home Group rather than installing products such as Active Directory. Home Group allows computers to access each other's resources on the network using one password. Home Group is good for home users who don't require large systems such as Active Directory to share some files or printers. So now that you understand why you would need a system like Active Directory, what exactly is Active Directory? Active Directory provides centralized control over your network, but is still flexible enough that it can be distributed across the world. We already know that it can be used to store usernames and passwords, but it can also be used to store resources. Things such as printer information and share information can be stored in Active Directory. Next, Active Directory can be used to store information for services such as email. If you install Exchange on your network, Exchange is integrated very heavily into Active Directory. In fact, Exchange cannot be installed without Active Directory. Finally, Active Directory stores group policy settings. Group policy allows you to make centralized changes to computers on your network quickly and easily. There may seem that there is a lot to Active Directory already, but just remember that Active Directory is a database. Everything in the Active Directory database is an object. In Active Directory, everything is an object regardless of whether it is a user account, group policy, or a printer. Active Directory is essentially a database that holds objects. In order for users and computers to be put in a logical management structure, Microsoft allows you to create a domain. A domain is a logical group of computers that share the same Active Directory database. All computers in a domain also share the same namespace. For example, if you had itfreetraining.com as your domain space, then any computer in that domain will share that namespace, like pc1.itfreetraining.com. Usually a domain will mirror the company organization. If, for example, IT Free Training was to have a smaller company in London, a separate domain could be created for this company to keep administration separate from the parent company. The London company could be called uk.itfreetraining.com. If IT Free Training were to purchase another company called High Cost Training, this company could be linked to the existing domains. Each of the companies has their own Active Directory database and all have their own settings. From an administrative point of view, they are all separate domains with their own database. If you were to make a change to group policy in one domain, it will not affect the other domains. As you will see later on in this course, you can share resources and user accounts between domains even though they are separate domains. Notice that when talking about Active Directory and domains, they are represented in a special way. Triangles represent a domain. Between domains, there can be a trust relationship. These are shown by the lines between the triangles. Inside these triangles, or domains, you can put users and computers and other Active Directory objects. Different literature may represent Active Directory objects in different ways. But if you think about the triangles being the domains and anything inside the triangles being part of that domain, you can't go wrong. Now that we know what Active Directory is and what a domain is, next we need to talk about the next big player in a domain, and that is a domain controller. A domain controller, put in its simplest terms, runs Active Directory domain services. As soon as this role is added to a Windows server, it becomes a domain controller. This may sound a little bit confusing at present, but to put it another way, a domain controller holds a copy of the Active Directory database. A domain controller, or DC, will replicate any changes made to its local copy of the Active Directory database to other domain controllers. This is how Active Directory keeps its database up to date when there are copies of the same database all around the world. Each domain controller replicates its changes through the network to the other domain controllers, and those domain controllers replicate their changes back. Lastly, a domain controller's primary job is to authenticate users. Once the user is authenticated and allowed access to the network, a domain controller also determines what the user can and cannot have access to. This should give you a good idea of what Active Directory is, domains are, and the role of the domain controller. In the next video, I will look at the features in Windows Server 2008, Windows Server 2008 R2, and Service Pack 1 for Windows Server 2008 R2. I hope you've enjoyed this free training video for Active Directory. For more free videos, please check out our website or YouTube channel. Thanks for watching.